Welcome to episode 10 of AU Manufacturing Conversations with Brent Balinski. This time around we speak to Peter Torreele, founder of 3RT, a company that is developing an answer to the mountains of waste in the wood products industry worldwide. Peter is an engineer, economist and marketer by training and has worked at a host of manufacturing companies, as well as spent 5 years as managing director at the World Economic Forum. He shares 3RT's story with us, which he began with a few insights into the flooring industry and seems set to make its mark on the world sometime soon. Thanks for downloading this episode. If you enjoy the conversation and you haven't already, please subscribe, leave a review via the podcast platform of your choice, and help us spread the word. Good morning, Peter, and thank you very much for joining us on AU Manufacturing Conversations.
Yes, you're welcome.
And so to get started, first question up as always is, how did you get here and what do you make?
Yeah, well, how did you get here is a pretty long story. First of all, what do we do at 3RT is basically we have developed a technology which converts a low-value wood residue into wood products which have the properties of 100-year-old trees. And to do that, we do that through a machine, a robotic machine. So basically we say we are growing trees in a machine. Mm-hmm. And the objective of this is basically to solve the issues we have related to old growth forests. So with our technology, there is no more need to cut old growth forests because we can use, for instance, plantation resources, which is younger trees, plantation resources, and provide the same products as you would get out of a forest.
Could you tell me a little more, please, about the origin story of your company and how you got started?
My background is I'm an engineer, industrial engineer. I'm as well an economist, applied economics. But then I did an MBA in marketing because I was excited about things that you can see and feel. And so I worked my whole life basically in large multinationals, which are trying to do some good in the world. So Danone was my first company for 15 years, a French multinational making healthy food products like yogurts and Evian water. They used to have as well beer, which I consider as well a healthy product, but anyway. It was Danone. And then I moved to pharmaceuticals with Roche, where I was the global VP of marketing. So there I learned a lot about the R&D pipelines, obviously, and the value of patents. Then I was headhunted into the World Economic Forum, where I was managing director for 5 years. So that is Davos, if that rings a bell. And there, basically, I learned to work with governments and appreciate the language you have to use with governments to get something done. And secondly, as well, the importance of looking over the horizon. So not focusing on things that are important today, but focusing on things that will be important tomorrow. That's the only way you can stay ahead of competition. But forward looking, what can come over the horizon. And I used all that knowledge when I became the CEO of a Chinese Australian company, which had invented the first strand-woven bamboo products. There, the value proposition was basically use a grass to replace tropical hardwoods. And still is pretty successful. But what I learned there was basically when I went around the world with that product, the feedback from the big wood operators was, if you can do it with grass, can you do it as well with our wood residue? And that's where I discovered enormous amounts of wood residue that is created in the wood industry. This is mostly then used for instance, fuel to burn in the kilns. What we tried to do with our technology is basically saying, how can we add the most value to that wood residue? So it's all about value add. And that's really the origin. So the origin of 3RT was about realizing that there is an enormous amount of waste in the whole supply chain and the value chain of the wood industry. And how can we add the maximum amount of value to that? Linked to that was at the same time the whole issue which came up around sustainability, protecting our natural assets, and in particularly protecting our old growth forests. So if we combine the two, we had the problem and we had the opportunity, and then it was finding the solution.
You said wood residue. Are we talking about knots and veneers and wood chips? What do we mean?
It depends. So our technology in itself is broad enough to address all those different possible usages. So it could be, first of all, it don't only have to be wood. It could as well be grasses or other things. The technology works for all that type of materials. In the wood industry, where are the biggest waste streams? The first biggest waste stream is, of course, in a traditional sawmill, because as in a sawmill, you turn something that is round into something that becomes cubical, like panels, boards, and all that. So there's a lot of waste created there. Offcuts, as they call it. Secondly, because wood is a natural product, not every tree and not every log is perfect. Yeah, there are knots inside, there are holes inside. Sometimes insects have eaten parts of it. So there is a lot of natural defects which create as well a waste stream. And then a third big one, of course, is if you look at both in old forests, or I would say regrowth forests and in plantations, to maintain that ecosystem, you have to do a lot of thinnings by law, governments and owners. And those thinnings is basically taking out the smaller trees when they grow to give space to the healthier ones to grow bigger. Yeah, it's called thinnings. Again, trees with not very good quality in terms of properties, relatively small, so they cannot be used in existing process systems. That's where we take all those waste from. And then the trick, of course, the trick of our technology is converted into something that looks exactly the same and feels the same and behaves the same as a mature, old growth tree of 100 years old.
For turning that waste of all the kinds you've mentioned into something that looks and performs like high quality hardwoods, what sort of R&D, and I imagine it's no small answer, what kind of R&D has been needed to come up with this solution?
First of all, this is about innovation. We could not have come up with that idea of that solution if you would have focused only on optimization, what is existing in the industry. There is a fundamental difference. Optimization happens within the industry itself, where people, engineers, scientists, are trying to make an existing process either better, cheaper, faster. Yes, that's optimization. Innovation is looking at the process and looking at how can I do it differently. And that different approach always comes from outside the industry. So in our case, I had the luck of meeting with the university in Adelaide, where they have a very large nanotechnology and materials science department. I spoke with the founder there, a professor called David Lewis, who had never worked in wood before. He himself came from IBM. His other guys are coming from the polymers, the plastics, automotive. And so they were looking at the process with completely new eyes. And the new eyes was really going back to the fundamentals of what does a tree do when it grows. Yeah, and it's basically very basic. The tree creates its own lignin, which is the adhesive, right, the glue. And the glue cures with the fibers of the wood because of 3 parameters: temperature, atmospheric pressure, and time. That's it. And so by realizing that and looking at really at a nano level, because that's what nanotechnology is all about, and understanding what is happening there, that we have been able to recreate that process in an artificial way, in a machine, and that's called basically biomimicking. So biomimicking is doing in an artificial way what nature is doing in a natural way. And that's the basic foundation of our technology. In terms of R&D, how we get there, or how we got there, or how we're still getting there, because it's an evolving roadmap, is basically using 3 pillars of technologies. One is, as I said, nanotechnology. It's really understanding what happens at the cellular level. And that's really fascinating with all the latest technologies they have invented to understand what's happening there. 15 years ago, we had no clue. We could see what happened, but we didn't know why. Today, we can understand the why. So there's a nanotechnology. And of course, there is the material science. Is the combination of what can recreate a adhesive, which is similar to lignin, which is non-toxic, recyclable, and is doing what it is supposed to do, which is gluing it together. And for that part, we worked with Henkel as a partner. The Henkel adhesive business is one of the biggest businesses in the world for adhesives. So we worked with them. And then the third part is, of course, making the machine. And the machines is all about recreating that natural process. And more importantly, making sure we can measure and identify all the different process parameters through sensors, through data analytics, through algorithms, to make sure that that process is efficient and does what it's supposed to do. And that's the advanced automation part. And there we work with Bosch, another big global company, Bosch. So the challenge has been in this biomimicking is that it sounds simple, but nature is very complex. And every day we're discovering new parameters that we can use to improve our process. So that's the basis of what we have been doing. It's innovation by looking at the industry from the outside.
I see. So innovation has to involve something completely new based on your definition of innovation, and that makes it separate from optimization. And to enable this innovation, to recap, for the nanotechnology side of things, you've partnered with Flinders. For material science, you've partnered with Henkel. And for the machine automation, you've partnered with Bosch.
Correct.
So we mentioned Henkel, and of course you recently received an investment from Henkel's venture arm, and congratulations. Are you able to say how much this was, and if there's a figure you can say that it values your company at? You might not be able to, but I've got to ask.
No, I won't say that because we are a private company. But the important thing is that we're working with 3 strategic partners. So I'm a big believer in a strategy is deciding what you do, right? Mm-hmm. A good strategy is as well deciding what you will not do. Distinction between what will I do and what will I not do. From day one, we have always said we need a certain level of capabilities, of skill sets that are very difficult to get in your own company. Therefore, let's make strategic partnerships with those companies who are really at the frontier of their own industry, who can help us going forward. Yeah, that's what we call our strategic partners. And so we have 3 of them, Flinders University, Henkel and Bosch. All 3 of them have put money into 3RT in one way or another. We've always tried to get them inside the tent. And the company is growing. The valuation is what it's going to be. For us, that's not so important. Our objective is to give this technology a global footprint as quickly as possible.
How many iterations of the machines have there been? Are you up to about 4 or 5 now? And their most recent version, I believe, now allows you to scale up production quite considerably and backed by a commercialization fund grant. Tell me about iterations and what you're up to now, please.
In our process, there are really three critical phases, right? There is the R&D phase, then there is the prototype phase, which is the beginning of the commercialization, and then there is the scaling phase. Yeah, yep. And they're all very distinctive, with distinctive processes required and different mindsets. On the R&D phase, we basically developed a first unit, which was basically putting a number of machines together to represent each of the steps in the natural growing process and trying to learn as much as possible out of that. In that first prototype, which was basically very manual, because we had to be able to have it very flexible, we had to be able to do what we wanted to do. We basically tested over 100 species from around the world. We did that over 4 years, and there our biggest financial support was the R&D tax refund from the federal government, which is, by the way, a godsend. That is really a fantastic tool for companies to do R&D, because if you're below a certain revenue level, 20 million, it's basically cash back in your hands at the end of the year. So within the same year, you spend and you get the money back. So it's pretty impressive. So that was the first phase. In that phase is very important as well, the whole prototyping in terms of products. Yeah, I'm working with minimum viable products just to make sure you get the market feedback. That's all the R&D phase. So that was the first machine. Then when we were confident that we understood what was required in terms of the minimal process steps, we built a first prototype machine. This was paid for partly by the Commercialization Australia grant. And that was really a first machine which basically was for, I think, 60% automated. And that one is running, so both the R&D line and this first prototype line are running in Adelaide in our innovation center at Adelaide Airport. Mm-hmm. Yeah, where we got a very good deal from the local government. By the way, governments love us. You know, if you have a nice story to tell, which makes sense for innovation, employment, sustainability, you can have in Australia very good government support. It's all about the language you use, right? So that was the second unit, and we are now building our first large-scale unit, which will go into Europe next year. And that one will be 95% automated. Okay, so tell me please, what sort of data are your machines collecting, and how does this improve what you do? Every process step, if you think about like a tree, so you have your incoming wood, which is always different because wood is a natural product. Mm-hmm. It's not like a piece of plastic or a piece of metal you put at the beginning of a machine and something comes out at the other end. The big challenge with wood, it's a natural product, so it's always different. So we already have to be able to manage that variability in the incoming veneers or incoming whatever it's going to be. Yeah. That's the first step. Then the second step is if we add our nano glue to it, we have to make sure the nano glue is there in the right amounts, mm-hmm. at the right level, penetrated into the product. Then it has to be heated, preheated through an infrared wet system, and so forth. So every process step is extremely important with relatively narrow bandwidths. And so what we do is basically, we have been capturing data since day one, since 2014, and we're constantly running that data to see if there's variations in the data, what came out at the other end as an end product. Why is it different? And we can work backwards. So it's like constantly optimizing the process to understand what variabilities in the process parameters leads to a different outcome. And if that outcome is positive, great, work further on it and even try to get a step further. If that outcome is negative, there's a defect, then try to understand and try to strengthen somewhere our control systems to avoid it in the future.
Another thing I wanted to return to, you mentioned developing an MVP at an earlier stage of the company. I was fascinated last time we spoke where you highlighted the amount of time, I think it was 3 years of giving away wood products to understand your market needs. And I really think that's an under-examined topic in Australia when we talk about innovation in general. Could you please tell me about some of the efforts you went to understand your market at that early stage and the problems that they were needing solved?
That's right, yeah. So the challenge working mostly with scientists is that they look at it from the scientific point of view, and not from the market point of view. Yeah. So the tool to do that, and it's a very well-known tool internationally, is what is called minimum viable product. So which is basically once our first R&D line was working, we were pressing wood products that we gave for free. So I signed a partnership, for instance, with TAFE in South Australia, which has a very big woodworking facility. We gave wood for free and we said, look, put them through all your machines and tell us what works and what doesn't work. So for them, it was a great way of working with a new piece of wood and having their young carpenters and trainees working with that. And for us, it was a great way to double check, does that thing work actually in all the machines? And for instance, one of the interesting things we discovered, that initially our product was too good because it was too hard, too dense. And if it's too dense, then your saw blades are blunting straight away. That was something we never thought about in the beginning. We thought the harder the better, like tropical hardwoods. People are happy when it's 1,400, 1,500 kilogram per cubic meter, but you need special machines to cut that. So that was not the right thing to do. And then, of course, it's all about the visuals, the look, the feel. So we spend a lot of time with those professional carpenters, who love wood and who work with the rarest species in the world to make lovely wood sculptures. We gave them our product just to make sure that they could believe as well that they could consider this as a real piece of wood. Yeah, so we spend a lot of time with them to understand what do you call the look and the feel, especially the feel of a piece of wood. So we spend a lot of time with those seasoned, older type guys to understand the basics of why is a piece of wood attractive to people. Yeah, it's basic. It's basically the feel and the look. Yeah. Yep. And then there's a lot of time from a process point of view. Can I go to all the machines? CNC machine, a basic saw, everything from very basic to very modern. And what do we have to take into account as we develop the product? And because there are so many applications for wood, obviously it's the oldest material, right? So many applications and therefore so many different machines, including music instruments, that it took us quite some time to find a recipe that is fit for most of those applications.
So many questions you just would have no idea that needed to be answered. And I guess that's why you do market development.
That's right. I've worked in different industries, obviously. Every industry, the more you dig into an industry, the more you realize its complexity.
Yep.
Yeah. We always, if you look at an industry like automotive, it looks simple. If you dive into it, the complexity of the supply chain, of the quality control system, which is the principles we use in our machines. Because from an automation point of view, we use automotive as our benchmark in terms of the processes and the systems we have to use. But I mean, those guys have worked decades to optimize their systems. And the more you dig into it, the more you realize how complex it is. Wood is exactly the same. The wood industry is very, very complex. There's a lot of knowledge there, which is not captured, which is sitting in people. And still today, we're discovering things we had no clue about. That's why, by the way, this technology is not finished. That's why if on our website, we talk about that. It's about a roadmap. So we have a materials roadmap and we have an automation roadmap. The materials roadmap is continuously do improvements to give our wood new properties as we discover new market segments. For instance, you have indoor, outdoor, above ground, below ground, structural, decorative, all different requirements. And from an automation point of view, constantly looking at, can we improve that process? Yeah, how can we make it more efficient through new data analytics, through algorithms, and so forth? So it's an ongoing process, and that's why we need those strategic partners, because in their own industry, they are faced with all those new technologies that they can bring in to help us, which you could never do yourself as a small company.
That's why you have the ecosystem approach.
That's right, absolutely. To me, if there's one thing I learned at the World Economic Forum in my 5 years, in how does the world turn around? The world turns around, of course, it's all about money, but how does the world turns around? It's about networking and creating your own ecosystem. It is so valuable.
And I think it's an approach that's underlooked in Australia generally for a number of reasons, and the more that we talk about it, the better. Another thing I'd like to look at, you mentioned structural timber. I wanted to ask, please, about the mass timber movement. Obviously, it's incredibly popular right now. I wanted to know how interesting is it to you personally and to 3RT from a commercial perspective?
Oh, look, I think that's the part when I was saying that it's important to look over the horizon. That's what we identified 10 years ago, not because we are so smart, but because we talked to the right people. That is all about the carbon footprints 10 years ago. They said carbon is going to be like water, very, very sensitive topic going forward, because its sustainability is all around that. The scarcity and the way we emit carbon. And the big polluters of carbon are, apart from the animals, of course, is the construction industry with the concrete and the metals. So everything that we can do in the world to bring in more wood applications is obviously great. And because we only a small part of the bigger picture, we only one technology, the more new products come into the market, the more technologies like through laminated timber and so forth come into the market, the more it makes that acceptable, and we all win, because it's such a huge pie. And not one technology can cover the pie of concrete and steel, because there's such a huge market. So we very much welcome all those discussions, and you can see now that the big boys in the wood industry are really getting serious about that, because the ESG criteria are becoming very, very important. If you want to raise capital today through a superannuation fund, you better make sure you know how to talk about ESG and what you do in your company to meet those standards. So I think the whole movement is there, and all those new technologies and new ways of using timber in a smarter way by using younger trees, plantation trees, and so forth is all very beneficial. So to me, I don't see that as a competition. I see that as a market builder.
Another thing I wanted to return to from our previous conversation last year was your business model, which I found very interesting, including the communication of what you do through an ROI simulator and developing a bespoke servitized solution for every customer rather than just, here's a machine, I've sold you that, clap your hands together, move on to the next thing. Could you tell me about your approach, please, and what's driven it?
What's driven it is, again, in terms of, it's about our strategy. What will we do and what will we not do? Yeah, we are a technology company. Yeah, we've put all our eggs in that basket. We are not really good, or we don't want to invest massively into going into the market with the sales and marketing and logistics organization. We don't want to do that. Therefore, we have to find partners who have that existing footprint. Yeah, and how can we make ourselves attractive to them? The machine is not a solution. The machine is a tool. The solution is our technology. We will customize for you the products you need to make your footprint either more profitable or bigger or more appealing to the market. So it's looking for the complementarity of how can we fit, or how can our strategy fit with their strategy. The big operators have a lot of machines. They don't need another machine. So it's not about the machine, it's about the technology. And they're not going to invest in the science and the engineers to try to understand our technology, and they don't have to. So that's why our value proposition is we have an innovation center. We have 3 global partners, 3 strategic partners who will continuously help us to become better and serve you better and help you to find better solutions in the market. So we are basically part of your R&D team to help you as a customer of 3RT to become more competitive in the market. And the ROI calculator is the same. It's saying this machine costs so much, but your payback will be within 18 or 24 months. So it's all helping them, the customer, the potential customer, to see us not just as a provider of a machine. No, we are your R&D partner, and we give you access to this exciting new technology to help you become more competitive in the market and try to help solve some of the sustainability issues. Yeah, so it's a customer approach, right?
Another thing I wanted to ask, and it's a recurring question in this series, I think it's an important question, and given your role as a strategic thinker and a person who's running an advanced manufacturing company who has had a background that takes in quite a few different things, I'd be really interested to get your perspective. The question is, why is it important that Australia develop a stronger manufacturing ecosystem?
That's a big question, huh?
I guess.
If you look at it from the government point of view, firstly, they're missing a huge opportunity. We have fantastic universities. There is a lot of innovation happening in Australia. One of the reasons that is the case is because of the R&D tax refunds. If you look at the biomedical and so forth, they're all in Australia. Why? Because all those huge investments are being paid back through the R&D tax refunds.
Yep.
And then once the R&D is done, there is no pathway, or very often it's too difficult to find a pathway to commercialize in Australia. And so they take the innovation back to America or Europe or Asia, and we lost it. So from the government point of view, to give a bang for the buck in terms of the expenditure and the efforts they put in universities and R&D tax refunds, there should be a much more flexible way to get grants and support to manufacturing in Australia. That's the first one.
Yep.
But the second one, and I think that's probably a bigger one, it's about the mindset of manufacturing here in Australia. If you do normal manufacturing, not value-add manufacturing, you have no chance, right? Because we're living next door to the Chinese, who can make everything cheaper, faster, and better. Well, not better, cheaper and faster. So manufacturing based on cost, you're not going to make it. So it's all about how can we create value add and make sure we can put in the market products which can compete internationally. Yeah, and I think all the basic, and the government is doing a lot of things that are trying to motivate us to do that. But I think it's something in the Australian mentality that it seems to be very hard to look at it that way. Yeah, giving value add to our resources doesn't seem to come natural in Australia for one reason or another. I don't know which one.
I don't know, if something's easy to do, then that's sometimes all the encouragement needed for someone to do it. I mean, there's good easy money. Well, I mean, easy, not up to a point, but there's easy money to be made in resources and property, so people invest in that, and I guess you can't really blame them because that's what's in front of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Least resistance.
Absolutely. And again, if you want to do something like an advanced manufacturing, that's expensive. So you have to raise capital. In Australia, investors are not very keen on investing in manufacturing, right? It's high. It's highly capex intensive, and oh my God, when will I see my money back? It's a whole ecosystem which has to be built up. No, we have some very successful companies here, of course, who are working in that space. But yeah, look, I don't have a good answer for you.
That's fine. I think we're more or less on the same page there, and I can accept your response. Tell me, how close are you to your first international sale, and are we expecting you to announce anything anytime soon?
Yeah. Well, So we entering Europe next year. So I'm actually leaving for Europe next week for a month to finalize all that stuff there. So that's our first one. And after that, it will go relatively fast. That's as well one of the benefits we have now with Henkel CVC, the venture capital arm of Henkel. It's not only about the money that they invest, it's more about the networking, their expertise in scaling. Because as I said, there are really three different business models, right? You have the R&D model, then you have the commercialization model, the early prototyping, and then you have the scaling. For us, it's global scaling. That's again a completely different ballgame. So that's where it's good to have the expertise from a Bosch and a Henkel, because those guys operate globally.
And lastly, do you have any closing comment to make, or perhaps a thing to plug while you're on the line?
To what?
To plug, if there's anything you'd like to mention.
To plug. No, look, I think it's all about innovation is about curiosity. Yeah, you have to be curious. You have to ask yourself the why question. And that's the beginning of everything. It's the curiosity, and then build on that the networking. Networking is so important. It's not what you know, it's who you know. They say that it is so true.
Mm-hmm.
And networking cannot be Australian. Networking has to be global. And today we have those lovely tools like LinkedIn and so forth that you can connect to everybody in the world. Yeah. So curiosity and networking are the key fundamentals to get innovation going.
Okay, well, thank you for that last comment and for your time. It was a good conversation, and I appreciate you joining us here on AU Manufacturing Conversations.
My pleasure. Thanks for your interest. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Bye for now.
Cheers.